Excerpts from Scott Teitsworth's Krishna in the Sky with Diamonds, the Bhagavad Gita as Psychedelic Guide. Part 2. Verse 26. All these sons of Dhritarashtra, with hosts of rulers, Bhishma, Drona, and that son of a charioteer, with our warrior chiefs, verse 27, are rushing into your fearful mouths, terrible with teeth. Some are found sticking in the gaps between the teeth with their heads crushed to powder. Arjuna is into the part of the trip where he would totally freak out if he hadn't entered it intentionally and consciously. Experiencing your inevitable death makes it lose its sting. Paradoxically, confronting death is an essential part of the true rebirth, glibly preached but seldom practiced in many religions. Once you've experienced your own extinction, death loses its sting. You can at last go forward as a free human being who no longer has to choreograph your life to simply avoid pain and cling to islands of pleasure in a doomed sea of hostility. Sanskrit famously uses the same word, kala, to indicate both time and death. Time indubitably erases all traces of each life sooner or later. Verse 28. As many rushing torrents of rivers race toward the ocean, so do these heroes in the world enter your flaming mouths. The river inevitably leads back to the ocean. The course of life has often been compared to a river, seeping out of the ground in the remote, high mountains, following the course of its fate in the form of gravity and topography, over and around many obstacles, joining forces with other similar streams. Ultimately, it pours into the sea, symbolizing reunification with the Absolute. From the ocean, the vaporous spirit of water is lifted up to waft through the sky and return to the mountain tops, fulfilling the cycle again and again. At the back of Arjuna's mind, he must be wondering, we're all going to die soon enough. Why hurry the process? Can't we just stop for a moment? Death, the great guru, can teach us how to truly live. Verse 29. As moths speed into a blazing fire to be destroyed, just so do these worlds also speed into your mouths unto their destruction. Verse 30. You lick up all worlds, devouring on every side with your flaming mouths, filling the whole world with glory. Your fierce rays are blazing forth, O all-pervading one. Note, death, change, and transformation, or the eventual inevitable end of anything in time, is what makes that thing poignant and purposeful. As Alan Watts said, death is what makes life poignant. There's no figure without a background. There needs to be a yin for there to be a yang. This is the sublime linguistic roots of the word glory and glorious. Arjuna's celestial vision ends with him imagining all life forms on a high road to their destruction. It's as though they were born only so that they could die. Again, we can say that's one way of looking at it, but surely their birth was the main point of the whole game in the first place, wasn't it? Arjuna, through his vision of life's brevity, knows what to do with his hour on stage to make it meaningful. Because of his newfound conviction of the brevity of life, Arjuna will never again be oblivious of where he's going, like a heedless insect hurtling towards certain death. He will want very much to know what he should do with his hour on the stage to make it meaningful. The glory of simply being fuel for a funeral pyre isn't all that glorious when you've caught a whiff of the stench. Verse 31. Tell me who you are, so fierce in form. I bow to you, O superior God. Be gracious. I want to understand you, O primal one, nor do I know your positive continued becoming. Note, that last phrase, I don't know your continued positive becoming, simply means I don't understand you. Verse 32 through 34. Krishna said, I am world-destroying time, grown into hardened maturity, operating here continuously, desolating the worlds. Even without you, none of the warriors standing in the opposing armies shall continue to exist. Therefore, arise and gain fame, Arjuna. Conquering your foes, enjoy the realm of abundance. By me they have already been slain. Be the incidental cause only, Arjuna. Drona and Bhishma, Jayadratha, Karna, and the other great battle heroes are all slain by me. Do not be distressed. Fight on. You shall conquer in battle your co-warriors. The perception of separation. The perception of separation is considered by yogis to be a product of ignorance and the primary source of suffering, both individually and collectively. Beings are like islands of detritus that form on the surface of the ocean, only to be scattered again by the action of wind and waves. In the Vedantic viewpoint, consciousness coalesces as nature in a similar centripetal impulse. Curiosity, which comes from the same root as cure, leads us to pry beneath the surface and reconnect with this supernatural source. It is important to see how these 3 verses are an answer to Arjuna's plea in verse 31. He begs for Krishna to reveal who he is and explain his positive continued becoming, quote-unquote, which means his time aspect with a capital T. In other words, what's going on and where is it all headed? Arjuna first asked, "Tell me who you are," and Krishna replies, "I am time." Arjuna then said, "I bow to you," and Krishna tells him to arise and gain fame. When Arjuna says, "I don't understand you," Krishna responds that he, the Absolute, is the true cause of everything, whereas individuals are no more than incidental causes. He means there is a large-scale evolution taking place in the universe that is not subject to individual control, but within that grand scheme, individuals do have a role to play in the unfoldment of their existence. The call to rise and fight echoes Krishna's earlier demands that Arjuna stand up and face life. When Krishna says we should conquer our foes, he's instructing us to overcome our obstacles on every level. Arising to gain fame means becoming proficient in our chosen lifestyle. The fact that these obstacles of foes have already been slain by time means that all our opposition will eventually vanish like the morning mist. We should go forward with full confidence, and there's nothing like surety to enable it. But our confidence absolutely must be based on legitimate understanding, or it too will become the swaggering of inebriated souls marching toward disaster. Non-contemplative people react to immediate influences, and so find themselves eternally buffeted by necessity. But the contemplative eye is able to get distance on any situation. It is in this sense that the obstacles we face are all killed by Krishna as time. We have to take the long view, going from the here and now to the everywhere and always. We might say that Arjuna's direct experience of the Absolute has accelerated him out of the highly pressurized here and now and into the everywhere and always. This marks his true birth as a philosopher or rishi. Verse 35. Sanjaya said, having heard that speech, Arjuna, stuttering emotionally and trembling with fear, with palms joined worshipfully, bowed down before Krishna and spoke these words. Arjuna's work is not finished. We're constantly, unconsciously making choices about how we respond. Ideally, Arjuna would instantly arise and gain fame, but realistically, a lot of work remains for him to normalize his consciousness. He needs to sort through his conditioned responses of neurological circuitry, samskaras, and discard the useless or outmoded ones, reinforcing instead the best of them. This is an ongoing activity. Haiku quote, at the soul's center, ripples in the still water go for miles. The entire remainder of the Gita is designed to teach Arjuna how to integrate his experience so that he can cope with his heightened awareness and become a positive contributor instead of a misfit. An interesting note, there's a very thin line, or no line at all, between a spiritual, ecstatic experience and insanity. Studies have shown that artistic creativity and schizophrenia overlap significantly. Verse 36. Arjuna said, O Krishna, it is but right that the world is delighted in praising you, that demons fly in fear to every quarter, and that all hosts of perfected ones bow in adoration to you. Verse 37. And why should they not bow to you, O great self, more venerable even than Brahma, the first maker, O endless God of gods, basis of the universe? You are the imperishable one, existence and non-existence, and what is beyond even that. Natural intelligence, the absolute. Not just animals, but plants, single cells, and even atoms and molecules are coming to be known as aware of and interactive with their environment. Planetary and even larger systems are beginning to be seen as functioning intelligently by some measures. We are not the most advanced intelligence around. We are unique in some ways, but we are dwarfed by the intelligence that keeps all systems in harmony and running virtually forever. Verse 38. You are the first of the gods, Krishna, in the ancient spirit. You are the supreme basis of the universe. You are both the knower and the knowable. You are the transcendent beyond and the immanent receptacle here. The universe is pervaded by you, O one of limitless form. Dualistic dichotomy. Arjuna's newly established excellence as a philosopher-yogi is evidenced in his dialectical pairing of some of the terms. Arjuna now knows that all the dualities of life are subsumed in the unity of the Absolute, which he addresses here familiarly as you. Where religions are often pitted against each other, Arjuna now sees them as different aspects of a single underlying truth. Individuals evince the same sort of dichotomy. We have moments of direct involvement with the here and now, interspersed with long periods when we glide along almost ritualistically, relying on memory and habit. Intelligently integrating both capacities makes for expertise in daily life. Knower and knowable clearly belong together as a matched pair. Their synthesis is knowledge. The keynote of Vedantic philosophy is that the knower and what is known both arise together from a universal consciousness, and bringing them together restores the absolute basis of awareness. Dhamma, the receptacle of the immanent natural world. The word Dhamma, translated as receptacle, has elsewhere been translated as supreme abode, meaning the all-encompassing unmanifest in which all manifestation resides, or into which it is periodically received back. Nataraja Guru, Scott Teitsworth's guru, is correct to perceive that since the transcendent and immanent aspects are being paired here, the word is used specifically to imply immanence, a relationship with the natural world. This is yet another of the essential paradoxes addressed in Vedanta, and uniting them is a supreme achievement. Compensation, proclivity for seeing the contrary of every proposition. A common after-effect of the psychedelic experience is a proclivity for seeing the contrary of every proposition. Immediate awareness of the flip side of everything leaps to mind instantaneously. Recognizing the unity of life is a mark of adulthood, which explains why many early societies used psychedelic medicines as a rite of passage. Verse 39. You are the god of wind, death, fire, ocean, the moon, the first of progenitors, and the great-grandsire. Hail! Hail to you! 1,000 times and again hail! Hail to you! Chakras. One of the techniques of the Gita is to secretly weave the chakras into Krishna's discourse, as is done here. Form, basis, ocean, fire, and wind are related to the first 4 chakras, more commonly called earth, water, fire, air. Death must be associated with the 5th chakra, that of Akasha, or space. Death allows life to exist, just as space allows matter to exist, by making room for it. The moon is ever a symbol of individual consciousness, since it is a reflection of the light of the source, the sun, and so is located in the 6th chakra. True origination pours in through the 7th chakra, which is thus the first of progenitors. Arjuna's meditation as he regains awareness of his body is to tune into each chakra in turn and connect it with the absolute in principle, thereby harmonizing his entire system and flooding it with energy. Verse 40. Prostrations to you before and after. Prostrations to you on every side. O all of endless potency and immeasurable strength. You terminate all, then you become all. Note: Krishna has asked Arjuna to remain standing, so this is a mental obeisance, an inward gesture of appreciation, not an actual physical prostration. Terminating and becoming. Krishna as Vishnu. The Absolute comprises all three aspects. The third pair of dialectical phrases is destruction and creation, expressed as termination and becoming. Krishna as the Hindu Vishnu is assigned the role of preserver in between those two poles, but now Arjuna recognizes that the Absolute comprises all three aspects of existence at once. Most other commentators render the last phrase as you permeate all, then you become all. However, when we translate it this way, it tells us that Arjuna now understands the cyclic nature of the universe and the Absolute's role in it. Verse 41 and 42. Whatever I have said rashly, from carelessness or fondness, addressing you as O Krishna, O Yadava, O comrade, thinking of you as an intimate and ignorant of your greatness, and for whatever jesting irreverence I may have shown you, whether at play, reposing or seated, or at meals, either when remaining by myself or when you were present, that I ask you to forgive me, O unpredicable one. We knew this was coming. Arjuna now feels keen embarrassment over having mistaken the truly paradisiacal nature of everything for some sort of ordinary reality. Matter is a temporary form of nearly infinite energy. Einstein demonstrated that matter is merely a temporary form of nearly infinite energy, and it's really only an appearance of form at that. Yet when we process that truth, at some point there is a disconnect. When we conceptualize something, it tends to become inert, static, fixed in time and space. Arjuna has just had his own concepts explosively revised to reveal what he, like Hamlet's Horatio, has been leaving out of his philosophy. He feels the unique pleasure of realizing the profundity of his blindness as it falls away. We don't know shit. Our certitudes are products of habit. We act as if we know what we're doing, when in fact we know virtually nothing. Our certitudes, our sureties, are merely habitual assumptions and defensive barricades. Krishna will certainly forgive Arjuna in his unintentional ignorance, because the game of life is about shedding ignorance in favor of wisdom. The great 13th century Gita commentator, Jnaneshwar Maharaj, paraphrases how Arjuna feels. I have been stupid and, not knowing this greatness of yours, have treated you with familiarity. I have used nectar for washing the floor. I have used the wood of the most valuable tree to make a fencing round my farm. With my hands on your feet, I now declare that I did all this through ignorance. Thankfully, the rivers collect dirty water and move toward the ocean, but the ocean receives them all just the same. You have allowed me to be praised in assemblies when all the praise should go to you. The falsity of predication. The uncommon epithet, O unpredicable one, exhorts the falsity of predication. In the sentence, this is a pot, this is the subject, and pot is the predicate. Under examination, the this turns out to be highly mysterious, like the Absolute itself. We only know what this is when we define it with a predicate, such as pot. Pot satisfies us because it's a specific thing we can recognize. We live in a world of predications of the mysterious this, and we content ourselves with just the predicates. We don't bother looking for the subject, the real this. Here Arjuna recognizes the Absolute as unpredicable, meaning it can't be adequately defined by any predication, any definition. As has been said, a God defined is a God confined. Verse 43. You are the Father of the world, of the moving and unmoving. You are to be reverenced by this world, and are the supreme Guru. None is your equal. How then could there be one greater than you, even in the three worlds, O one of incomparable greatness? A reverential attitude is the best insurance against developing a bloated ego after having this kind of transcendental experience. Throughout the Gita, the arrow of interest and devotion is always turned away from the ego toward the absolute. Humility, accepting faults, lack of absolute assuredness, center. Half-baked thinkers insist on grilling people about their beliefs in the desperate hope that by denigrating others, they're somehow elevating themselves. It's a great blessing to realize our limitations and learn humility. A life of bombast is constrictive and binding, and it is likely a mask for deep insecurities. By accepting our faults, we grow stronger, but by flaunting our strengths, we undermine ourselves. Verse 44. Therefore, bowing down and prostrating my body, I seek your grace, O adorable Lord. It is but proper that you should bear with me, as father to son, as friend to friend, as lover to beloved. Arjuna is rapidly surrendering his exaggerated sense of self in exchange for an open and guileless state that is much more amenable to a spiritual lightness of being. Individual empowerment acquired through spiritual effort can lead to megalomania or spiritual egotism if it's not counterbalanced with a commensurate humility. The three-tiered guru-disciple bond. Arjuna lists three archetypal dialectical relationships that define his discipleship with Krishna, all of which are made out to be aspects of a guru-disciple bond. The somewhat guarded relationship of a parent and child in guru discipleship progresses to mutual respect and a more equal status as it blossoms into friendship. The culmination occurs with the dissolution and unity of the apparent separation of guru and disciple, which Arjuna compares to two lovers merging in a single soul. Verse 45 and 46. I am glad, having seen what has never been seen by anyone before, but my mind is troubled with fear. O God, be pleased to show me that very form, O God of gods, O abode of the universe. I want to see you, even so, diademed with mace and discus in your hand. Assume that very form with 4 arms, O thousand-armed one, O one of universal form. Arjuna seeks familiarity. Untethered, our psyches may plunge into a total, unimaginable vision. The absolute is the forbidden territory that only the brave or foolish dare to enter. 3 cheers for fools. Arjuna, stunned, is now begging to be returned to the more or less conventional image of the god Vishnu. It is not uncommon to want to hold on to the glories of a psychedelic excursion, but as the medicine wears off, they fade away like dew before the sun. Krishna denies Arjuna's request for stable familiarity. It's important to notice that Krishna does not honor Arjuna's request, and he doesn't even go as far as to acknowledge it. This is a powerful, symbolic gesture with many implications well worth pondering. Clinging to religious iconography, often called idolatry, is antithetical to a spiritual state of mind, because our inclinations are to interpret new experiences in familiar terms, but that deadens them. Vishnu is himself a symbol of something without form, and he is thus only a poetic image. In Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, Carl Jung writes of his own near-death experience and the outgrowths of it, which are remarkably like Arjuna's experience. Time is an important factor in both visions, with the compression of past, present, and future into the now. It is accompanied by an oceanic high, in which the detritus of life is painfully stripped away. Arjuna begs for the reinstatement of his individuality, but Jung was eager to be rid of it, as he could see how bad it hampered him. Says Jung of the experience, anyone who takes the sure road is as good as dead. Convention doesn't keep us safe or happy. Keep moving. The Gita recognizes the feeling that once we catch the merest glimpse of the absolute, we want to retreat as fast as possible to conventional images in hopes that all our comfortable activities and attitudes will keep us safe. They don't. As Jung says, they keep us dead. This ties into the role of churches, governments, and the like as substitute parental figures. Their self-appointed task is to comfort us and relieve us of the anxiety of being fully human and alive. We are trained to keep the lid on everything, which makes us so much less than we could be. But, being fearful children in our hearts, we will lash out at anyone who suggests lifting the lid, even nail them to a cross. We prefer to remain in darkness, even if we are secretly miserable and terrified, since it's familiar and it bears the seal of approval. Odd, isn't it? The expanding boxes theory. In what I call my expanding boxes theory, as we go through a life of creative exploration, we gradually expand our awareness. At certain moments, we notice we are confined in a kind of psychological box, and as we grow, we fill it up. Like a chick inside an egg, we press harder and harder against our rigid container until it breaks open. For a time afterward, we experience a soaring sense of relief and increased freedom. But after a while, we begin to notice that we're just in a bigger box, that there are still limits, and soon we will begin to confront our next set of constraints. I imagine the series of boxes goes on forever, so we should not mistake relative freedom for absolute liberation. Verse 47. Krishna said, "By my favor, Arjuna, this supreme form has been shown, by union with the self, made up of light, universal, endless, primal, never before seen by anybody other than yourself." Realization's particular attributes are unique to the individual. While there is a general correspondence between every person's realization, its particular attributes are unique to the individual, and they are unique even each time an individual has such an experience. The universal must always come to us in a specific guise. This verse specifically states that the vision arises from yoga or union with the self, that is, the union of a seeker with the universal ground of being. The string of lovely adjectives made up of light, universal, endless, primal, is as good a description of the indescribable as we can hope for. Light is the tissue of consciousness, and it fills all space, universal, and time, endless, as the primal one. The last line of the verse must mean that Arjuna's vision is from his own unique perspective, and no one will see it exactly the same way he did, yet it is available to everyone as their very nature. As it manifests, the Absolute is non-static, so its apparent form will be different from moment to moment. In other words, every time someone has a vision of the Absolute, it will be never before seen. You can never step into the same river twice, has been said. The vision will also be shaped to a significant extent by the set and setting. Every vision is a fabulous amalgam of temporal and eternal, individual and universal elements. Essential universal empathy, the goal of life, what really matters. When you know the Absolute as the core of every being, you naturally love the good in them and have compassion for their shortcomings. You realize everyone's insight is absolutely unique. The only thing that really matters is to extricate ourselves from unwisdom and move toward wisdom, and the more support we offer each other, the more rapid the progress we will all make. Verse 48. Neither by the Vedas, sacrifices, nor by study, nor by gifts, nor by ritual, nor by severe austerities can I possibly be seen in such a form in the human world by any other than you. How to live, applying inner and outer dialectics of yoga in everyday life. The inner and outer dialectics of yoga, conceived in a total context of the Absolute and applied in ever-fresh ways to present circumstances, all guided and realized through bipolar interaction with a guru, which can be anything that brings enlightenment, pretty well sums up the Gita's recommendations for how to live. Tao, no absolution or finality. The master doesn't think to act. The universe acts through him. It is unhealthy to focus too much on any one partial vision, inevitably tainted with projections and fanciful imaginings. We are guided to cherish and honor them, then leave them behind so we can continue on our way. A true mystic just opens their heart to the onrushing wave. They don't try to build a wave from spare parts lying around the house. A woman gives birth to a child, but she has no idea how to put one together from scratch. Something beyond us is at work here. We have only to relinquish our petty fixations to allow the beyond to permeate our being with truth, beauty, and goodness. This is a perfect place to add some timeless words of wisdom from Lao Tzu, from the Tao Te Ching, verse 38. A truly good man is not aware of his goodness, and is therefore good. A foolish man tries to be good, and is therefore not good. A truly good man does nothing, yet leaves nothing undone. A foolish man is always doing, yet much remains to be done. Knowledge of the future is only a flowery trapping of Tao. It is the beginning of folly. Therefore the truly great man dwells on what is real and not what is on the surface, on the fruit and not the flower. Therefore accept the one and reject the other. Verse 49. Be not distressed. Do not be confused, having seen such a terrible form of mine. Free from fear, mentally comforted, again behold that very form of mine presently here. It is very important that Krishna does not grant Arjuna's request to appear in conventional guise. He goes directly back to being the ordinary friend and charioteer he has been all along. There's no exaggerated imagery being peddled, nothing that isn't universal. Arjuna's vision has its own meaning to him alone, and the less he packages it in standard issue boxes, the greater its value will be. Krishna is just a normal guy, and he demonstrates for us just how amazing that is. Like him, we carry the absolute in our very core. Verse 50. Sanjaya said, having thus spoken to Arjuna, Krishna again showed his own form, and the great self, becoming mild in form, consoled him who was terrified. All people can achieve the level of all saints and spiritual figures. We are all the absolute incarnate. Many religions have sabotaged their own usefulness by portraying their central character as wholly different from everyone else. The very value of a saint or other sacred being is that they demonstrate what is possible for all people to achieve. Once they are perceived as being beyond imitation, the seeker must resign in despair, content to stand hat in hand as a beggar at the gates of the divine realm. The Vedanta of the Upanishads and the Gita maintains that each of us is the absolute incarnate, such as in the teaching from the Chandogya Upanishad, Tat Tvam Asi, that thou art, and our potential is infinite, so Krishna is just some regular fellow. A veneer of quietude does not mean spiritual transcendence. Real spirituality attends a proper dynamic expression of energy and inner tendencies. Many people have the notion that if we can only control our inner turmoil and achieve a veneer of quietude, we will have reached the spiritual state. Not at all. In most cases, the spiritual technique initially adopted is intended to suppress the inner turmoil with great effort. But, like a pressure cooker, the steam builds up until it bursts out through some psychological relief valve. Socially acceptable outlets for the energy that we should direct toward our own enlightenment are non-psychedelic drugs, entertainment, hard work, and the like. Basically, these are more distracting than enlightening. By contrast, real spirituality shrugs off distractions to attend to a dynamic expression of our inner tendencies, along with a careful dousing of our excessive instinctual fires. Verse 51. Arjuna said, beholding again this, your mild human form, I am now calm, with my mind restored to its natural state. A life suffused with the energy and insight of the Absolute is the yoga the Gita extols as the highest achievement of human endeavor. Verse 52. Krishna said, this form of mine which you have seen is very hard to see indeed. Even the gods ever aspire to behold this form. Most of us have experienced powerful fear of death, dissolution into the Absolute, etc., at some point in our life, and a very common response is to immerse ourselves in trivialities, the hamster wheel of life, in order to try to drive out the fear of our mind. Because of this, the social milieu consists of an endless series of tasks and pursuits to distract us from the fear of our demise. If you wanted to hide truth and keep it safe from discovery, this might well be the place to do it, right behind the fear. Then nearly everything we did would lead us away from where we most needed to look. Verse 53. Not by worship, nor by austerity, nor by gifts, nor by sacrifice can I be seen in this form you have seen me. Verse 48 is repeated for emphasis, because this idea is resisted with all the might and main of the many vested interests that peddle salvation. Not by doing anything other than entering into the absolute does one attain the absolute. This is a key tenet of Advaita Vedanta, or non-dualism. All these categories, worship, austerity, sacrifice, etc., should not be given up, and are good insofar as they make you a better person. At their best, they are a fine, healthy way to live. But attaining the absolute requires us to go beyond mechanical activities, to tap into something that remains mysterious, no matter how hard we try to grasp it. Mental and physical health are still essential. While it is true that no formal ritual by itself produces unity with the beyond, some intelligently conceived activity is essential for our mental and physical health. Just because it doesn't get you high is no reason to throw it away. Your brothers and sisters, indeed all creatures, need you to be there for them, and you need to be there for yourself. Verse 54. But by devotion that excludes all else can I be known, and in principle entered into. This is the arrow pointed through the veil. Devotion that excludes all else could also be called absorption or one-pointed attention. The weakness of worshipful forms of devotion is that they are aimed at fixed mental images such as rigidly conceived gods. The Absolute is an ever-living reality, access to which is blocked by all such conceptions. Tat tvam asi, that thou art. Realize that you already are the Absolute. Since the Absolute is always here, we are already in it, so entering from outside is impossible. Entering in principle acquiesces to this fact. A veiled meaning comes in reference to tat tvam asi, that thou art. Only when you realize you are the Absolute have you fully entered the Absolute. Devotion is the next chapter of the Gita. The last two verses of this chapter provide an artful transition, as well as an assertion of just how crucial enlightened devotion to truth is. Verse 55. He who does actions that are mine, whose supreme is myself, whose devotion is to me, devoid of attachment, free from enmity to all beings, he reaches me, Arjuna. Unitive action, non-separation. Anytime you think, I am doing this because, or even more subtly, I am doing this, an element of duality is injected into the activity. The Gita advocates the artistic, sometimes called spiritual, temperament, where unitive action is essential. The musician, dancer, meditator, or tripper doesn't have time to stop and think dualistic thoughts. They are intrusive and disrupt the flow. Keeping in mind that in the Gita, me and mine refer to the Absolute, we can retranslate this verse as follows. The one who does absolutist actions, in other words, who performs unitive activity, whose philosophical orientation is centered around the harmonizing factor of the universe, who can attune completely with the Absolute and not become bogged down by irrelevancies, who is free to go psychologically wherever the winds of the Absolute might blow them, and who sees the Absolute in all beings, therefore becoming surpassingly kind. This is the model devotee who attains the Absolute. Gate, gate, paragate, parasamgati, bodhisvaha.